Start living your brighter tomorrow today.
Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one.
We're a synthetic biology company. We merge genetically modified cells with silicon. In other words, we build cyborgs.
What's been done to her?
You are the first of your kind.
Using this augmented reality collaboration software, an expert surgeon can now virtually transport himself into any clinical setting simply by using his phone or tablet or computer. Through simple everyday devices that we take for granted, through devices of the future, we can really do miraculous things.
What the hell is that? What are you doing?
I would like you to stop my heart. You give it 1 minute, and then you bring me back.
Can you talk about generative biology, generative medicine?
People had always thought of AI as something to augment analytics.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, you read a whole book in the second that I asked you what your name was?
In 2/100ths of a second, actually.
But the reality is AI is foundational in terms of how we think about augmenting creativity now. And that's what the generative revolution is really unlocking is, can we augment human ingenuity with computational creativity?
I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
Is the input request received?
Yes, Jenna.
How about a nice game of chess?
Good morning. It's great again to be here with all of you for the things that will blow your mind. We always do this the last day of our conference because we figure after going to maybe 70 or 80 sessions, you needed a little more mind-blowing, and that's what we're going to try to do. It's kind of hard for me to believe as I think back that we first did this session in 2014. Our goal was then, and our goal is now, to inform all of us of how digitization and the merger of science and technology is changing our lives in ways that we could not even imagine over a decade ago. We've discussed at this panel advances in robotics, brain research, diagnostic, and treatment of diseases. I've had the privilege of being on this stage with scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, all visionaries. They've shown us breakthroughs in three-dimensional bioprinting technology, creating organs for transplants, and assisting drug companies in their research. In 2014, we introduced the IBM Watson computer, introducing the age of cognitive computing and artificial intelligence, a term that was very rarely used back in 2014, and I would guess was probably been used in almost every single session here this year. We've seen robotic security teams that provide security and surveillance of properties. We've seen develop in surgical robots processes to make less invasive surgery, microsurgeries that can go almost anywhere in the body. We've examined the brain, the cognitive science, to understand how little we know about the brain and what the future holds as we learn more. We were introduced a couple years ago to a surgical simulator where a surgeon can go using MRIs and scans and augmented and virtual reality to rehearse a surgery and make them more effective when they do the surgery. We've talked about CRISPR and genetic engineering and the positives and negatives of both of those. Last year, we looked at applied virtual reality and digital medicine to address healthcare challenges of pain management, using advanced technologies and artificial intelligence to create predictive algorithms to make healthcare better, cheaper, and more widely available. So I promise you, again this morning, we have extraordinary panelists whose talents and efforts, as the film clip said, will help us make our future a good one. And as I think back over these years, and if I look at these extraordinary individuals to my right, I can't help but think how cool it's been for me personally to be able to sit on a stage like this and realize I'm sitting on a stage that probably, with all the extraordinary people at this conference, has the highest average IQ of any session. And then I'm humbled to think, if I leave the stage, that average is going to go up exponentially. So. But let me introduce our panelists, and let's get started. Mike Nally, sitting to my right, is Chief Executive Officer of Generate Biomedicines. Mike has had significant experience leading global organizations, spending a number of years at Merck, as he'll tell us, serving most recently as their Chief Marketing Officer, also having been President of Global Vaccines for Merck for many years, and of course vaccines is something we have talked about a lot in the last several years. Mike will share with us the work of Generate Biomedicines, which is exploring how the code of life through DNA dictate protein functions, and how Generate is using machine learning and advances in biology and biosciences to identify protein-based therapeutics to discover and create medicines and vaccines that will cure diseases and come to patients quicker and more affordable. And in a few minutes, he will translate what I just said. And to his right, I'm going to go next to Ash. Ash Agabi is the CEO of Koniku, a company revolutionizing healthcare by turning our bathrooms into healthcare data centers, using synthetic biology to analyze odors, using machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence as he merges synthetic neurobiology, neuroscience, and silicon technology to mimic the olfactory senses of many animals to assess our health in real time, detect diseases from odors that we produce long before there are any symptoms. And Dr. Nadine Hashasharam, the founder and CEO of Proximie, where she has drawn on her passion for innovation, education, and improving access to safe surgical care worldwide to move the operating room and surgery from the analog world, where it has been far too long, to a digital world, where surgeons become more knowledgeable and effective as data is mined and recorded, and through machine learning becomes available to other surgeons and surgical stakeholders across the globe. So let me now turn this over to our panelists. Mike, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what is going on at your company and what led you there.
Thank you, Richard. So first and foremost, it's a real pleasure to be here and share a little bit about the work we're doing at Generate Biomedicines. Generate was a company that was founded 4 years ago with a simple question in mind. What if we knew how the code of life in the form of DNA dictates protein function? And while scientists have been working on this problem for the last 40 years, oftentimes taking biophysical-based approaches and building up atom by atom, unfortunately the results lacked robustness. And so our team said, is there a different way of doing this? The reason the protein question was an interesting question to us, as all of you know, proteins drive about 95% of biology. They are the most amazing machines, sensors in the world. And if we could understand how to create new proteins, we could drive biology in ways that we've never had the tools to do so. The challenge has been, and you quickly look at this slide, you recognize our human mind is not good at reading the code of life. In many ways, we've had to borrow from nature to come up with the protein therapeutics that have cured many diseases. So our team said, can we use some extraordinary data sets to start to learn the principles of proteins and using machine learning to study every amino acid sequence that has been sequenced across the tree of life, so 180 million amino acid sequences, and every protein structure that we've been able to find in nature, and there are about 200,000 cataloged in the protein data bank. But ultimately, what we're really interested in is understanding, can we actually program for function? But what's really exciting for us, and I think you've seen this across a number of different domains, is whenever complex fields become engineerable, industrial revolutions occur. And we believe firmly that we are on the brink of an age in biology where biology will become programmable going forward. And so when you think about this, the impact it could have not only on therapeutics, but on key issues like sustainability, this has the promise to change the world. And so at Generate, we basically started studying and learning these principles from from nature. What we've seen is that these principles now allow us to come up with novel solutions that previous empirical or trial and error based methods simply couldn't find. And ultimately, by doing so, we can do it at a pace and a scale that is somewhat unique in drug discovery. And so for our organization, we spend a lot of time now thinking about how we marry up both the computational generation of DNA sequences, but we build and test each of those sequences in our labs to learn the functional principles of proteins directly from those that we create. Obviously, as all of you have seen with generative AI, one of the challenges has been hallucinations. We're able to suss out those hallucinations by building and testing these in the lab and actually learning from what not only works, but what doesn't work in pretty unique ways. The really amazing thing, though, is how this is allowing us to explore what is an unimaginably large space. So the average protein is about 200 amino acids long. And you have 20 natural amino acids in the library. So basically, the combinatorial possibilities is 20 to the 200th power. That's atoms in the universe cubed combinatorial possibilities in coding proteins. The biophysical-based methods of the past, where you're building up atom by atom, unfortunately, the complexity of protein systems has overwhelmed our ability to build these in a scalable fashion. And so through using machine learning, what we've seen is an amazing increase in our ability to do this. And so what you see on this chart is a simple comparison of the traditional biophysical-based methods, which have flatlined for the past decade, and it's comparing it to a machine learning-based method where we're learning directly from nature. And now we're able to create the amount of productive variability that allows us to explore this space in ways that traditional techniques simply couldn't compare. One of our advisors is the Nobel Prize winner, Francis Arnold, and Francis led a lot of work in error-prone PCR, so manipulating proteins by random mutagenesis. Unfortunately, after you change about 10% of the binding region of a protein, the mathematical expectation is you lose all function. So you cannot come up with a functional alternative. With our technology, what we've been able to show now is that we can change 60, 70% of the binding region. So we're exploring what is an ocean of possibilities and finding opportunities in ways that traditional techniques simply could not do. About 2 years ago, the team was tasked with a question: could we actually come up with better alternatives to existing therapeutics? And so we took the top 50 protein-based biotherapeutics. These are the biggest drugs in the world, the Humiras, the Enbrels, the Keytrudas, the Opdivos. And we said, could we come up with entirely novel sequences that perform as well, if not better, than the comparator and hit the same exact epitope? So in many ways, what we're trying to do is split the arrow on in archery. And what the team was able to do at this time was a team of 20 people. We were able to come up with 50 entirely novel sequences for each of the different programs. We produced and validated the top 20 of those, and we were able to show we were at least as good, if not better, than those. And having spent the majority of my career at one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, a team of 72,000 couldn't have done this in at least 10 times as long with 10 times the resource. So the technology generalizes across all protein modalities. So if you think about the biotherapeutic world, antibodies, bispecific, enzymes, peptides, cell and gene therapy all have protein foundations. The technology is applicable in all these domains, and we think we'll have novel breakthroughs in each and every one of them. What we're really talking about here is a migration point from an empirical endeavor of drug discovery, which is completely random. We basically borrow from nature, we tinker with it, and then we try and come up with something that can be mass-produced and ultimately provide therapeutic benefit. In the future, we will be programming medicines, and we can debate how long it will be until every protein is programmed, but we're clearly on that path today. The company, as a 4-year-old company, we are now working on 14 preclinical programs. The first programs will tackle some major unmet medical needs in infectious disease, oncology, and immunology. Our first 2 programs will enter the clinic in the next 6 months. And we have a major deal with Amgen to explore 5 different targets where they've had great underlying biological hypotheses, but they haven't been able to come up with the molecules to actually tackle those questions. What's really exciting as we go forward, though, is we're now creating novel protein constructs that have never been seen on this planet. If you think back in the 3.5 billion years the planet has been around, there have been about 20,000 unique protein concepts. We've been able to understand now the mathematical principles of what it means to be a protein, and we're coming up with novel designs almost by the second. And these are expressing in the labs at a rate that has surprised us. And so we're opening up a world to drive biology in ways that we've never been able to do so before. But what we are excited about is we're at the very early stages of this. The field of biology is going to change forever. That will change medicine. It will change sustainability. It will change the materials we use in the products we create. And through the advances in machine learning, better data sets, and a lot of ingenuity, artificial intelligence is going to help us find new answers to treat the greatest diseases in the world. So with that, I'll pass it over to Nadine.
Thanks. Thank you.
He's next.
Thank you, Mike. Next, Ash, why don't you tell us what you're doing, actually how it relates to the things that Mike is doing, and maybe from a different perspective.
Good morning, everyone. In the United States, we like to think everybody has access to the same level of health care as everyone in this room. In our country, there are locations that can be referred to as healthcare deserts, where people don't even have access to basic primary care. That is not a problem of money alone. It's not policy alone. It's a technological problem as well. The United States is a very rich country. We spend by far the most amount of money on healthcare of any country in the world. Most people would like to have you believe that this cost mostly goes into pharma or drugs. For every dollar that we spend on healthcare in this country, 70 of it goes to hospitals and doctors. We are not going to build our way out of this problem. And we can't train doctors fast enough. So how do we solve this? Our goal at Koniku is to assure one day everyone in America and beyond, to give them hope and take away worry. How do we do this? We have identified 4 key things. 1, we want every individual to be the boss of their own health. 2, we want a convenient system that gives people real options and real targets on how to improve their health. 3, with the advances we've seen across the board, we want to give them a closed-loop access to data that allows them to make informed decisions. 4, that solution must, I repeat, must be market-based. The way we're approaching this is as follows. Most of the time, when you hear about diagnostics, it's about blood, pricking folks, or doing a battery of tests. I want to tell you about a new modality, and that is breath and volatile organic compounds. Each one of you in this room is emitting anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 different volatile organic compounds from your breath. These are small molecules that are normally in your blood, that when the blood comes to your lungs to bind to oxygen molecules via the hemoglobin complex, there are these light molecules that are being pumped into your breath. It's like an exhaust. It gives us information on the state of function of various tissues in your body. We've known this since 460 BC. In fact, if you go to PubMed today and you search for volatile organic compounds and diseases, you'll find literally hundreds of articles. The problem has always been the technology to access this data. In fact, in some countries, they use dogs to detect cancer. They're medical detection dogs. Some of you that have dogs at home, you will know that when you're feeling sad, the dog is able to tell. Even animals are able to detect fear. They are not doing magic. They are going after small molecules and their ability to sniff it. Even some humans are able to detect this as well. I like to call this human a mutant because she has the ability to detect Parkinson's disease by smell. This is not an old wives' tale. This is something that has been proven in the lab that she could detect Parkinson's 15 years before it manifests via smell alone. So which brings us to the point. Each one of you in this room, why do you go to a hospital? You go to a hospital so that you can be connected to equipment that are collecting physiological data. Apart from trauma or delivering a baby or very, very serious disease, there is no reason why you should go to the hospital. And what the doctor does is to use this data to spot patterns. And based on her training, she's able to give you a response or an intervention mechanism. The funny thing is, every morning when you wake up and you go into the bathroom, you're literally giving away a lot of data. Data in the form of your bodily fluids. The data that is coming from your breath is quite similar from the data that is coming from your urine or other bodily fluids because these things are connected together in a system. So what we are doing at Koniku is to turn the bathroom into this healthcare data center where we could analyze your breath and other bodily fluids for data. We like to show this video of how it works, like I mentioned earlier, where all the way from your lungs, we are able to track the production of these chemical compounds. As they go out through your breath, you breathe on our device, we catch those signals, and we're able to tell you exactly what is wrong. And it's not just for saying it. This is something we are already doing. At the height of COVID, we did clinical trials with the University of Southern Nevada, where we were able to demonstrate for the first time that we could detect COVID from breath in a successful first-stage clinical trials. We have also been able to demonstrate not only are we able to detect disease from breath, we are also able to follow drug metabolism. We're able to detect things like amphetamine, cannabis, fentanyl, opiates, directly using our technology. And as the previous speaker said, the interesting thing is all of these drugs, they are designed to act on a protein. And as you will see later, our technology relies on proteins. So it's a natural fit. In fact, some of our engineers decided to test if we can detect fear. That doesn't say anything about our work culture at Koniku, by the way. But we went ahead and demonstrated that we could detect BPEA, this which is produced in large quantities when somebody is stressed. We're able to detect that in urine as well. Now, our goal is to start small. We have already built the technology. It works. We're already deploying it. But our goal is to start from the simpler problems first. Lifestyle issues, we want to be able to give people data that they can manage their own lifestyle. I want to quickly tell you about some of the industrial use cases that we've already deployed this technology to. So we did a head-to-head trial with dogs to demonstrate that we can detect explosives with the FBI and the mobile police in Alabama. And we showed that not only can we detect as good as the dog, in some cases, we can do better. And here is a video that shows you our deployment at the San Francisco International Airport for detection of explosives using our technology. How am I doing on time?
You're fine.
What we have built at Koniku is a smell cyborg that allows us to read the air and smell what is in the air. We have demonstrated here today that we can detect explosives in a completely seamless way. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to touch anything. Your bags are automatically screened.
We're doing a scenario of a check-in counter.
It's installed. It may have a big screen on the side or something.
Previous tests have done it in labs or in a warehouse testing, but in an airport testing, you're getting more of the air contaminants, right? This is all done by the sniffing of the air particles. And in an airport, you've got jet fuel, you've got people with different colognes, perfumes.
We have gone ahead and borrowed directly or taken the technology that biology has used to smell and put that on a chip, hence the cyborg. We have taken living biological neurons, we've genetically modified them to carry these proteins and stick them on a chip and manage to keep those cells alive for prolonged periods of time. So the biology now is acting as a sensor device, it's acting as a computational unit, and it's acting as a reporting unit. And the electronics surrounding it is doing further processing on it and helping us transmit that signal everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends like where you...
It was a bit emotional. This is exactly what we were waiting for. I mean, and when we all saw the curves and the signal popping, yeah, we were like, okay, we've done it. The beauty of the technology is that you can actually reprogram the cells to detect one compound or another. Today we are working with explosive, but we know that the technology is already able to detect other types of chemical compound, and that's what makes this technology so beautiful and versatile. It's a multi-solution technology. So you're screening explosives, you're screening breath and diagnosing disease in real time on a single device. In the case of COVID-19, we just completed the first phase of our clinical trials, and now we're moving to the second phase. One of the things that COVID has taught us is that now we have merged the issue of security and safety into one singular issue. So a person that is carrying a virus is as dangerous as a person that is carrying explosives on themselves. So we can also screen for that. There are multiple ways we can use that technology. For those of you that are interested, that video is available online, so you can watch it. And the other video where we take the same technology and we put it on a robotic dog, the quadrupeds that you see around, because of the small form factor, we're essentially able to create the dog from scratch, if you will. But those videos are available online. Please feel free to find them in the interest of time. But quickly, I want to tell you about the underlying technology and what we've built here, why it's so important, or why we believe it's so important. A lot of the technologies that you deal with today, they are working around three modalities: a sense of touch, sight, and sound.
The vast majority of our technology, that's what it's built on. For the first time, we have built a technology that allows us to digitize smell on a planet scale. And the only way that has become possible is because we have merged the advances in synthetic biology with silicon. To understand precisely what we have done, it's important to talk about how nature, over 600 million years, have been able to solve this problem. We use the dog as a good example of this. So the dog's detection of smell occurs in 4 clean stages. The first stage is the ability of that dog to pull in the air, and humans work essentially on the same principle, to pull in the air. That air binds to proteins on the surfaces of cells. Those cells in the nose of the dog, in the second phase, generate an electrical signal that goes to the brain of the dog where cognition happens. What we have figured out at Koniku is how to genetically, so we take these cells out, yes, we genetically modify those cells using DNA particles, and we force these cells to express any receptor that is of interest for us. So what we have here now is a machine that has a living part to it, living cells to it, merged with a silicon component. And you find that that technology stack is very powerful. It now means we have built a technology that normally the size of the machine is about 30 kilos, costing anywhere from $100,000 to millions of dollars. This is a GCMS machine, and we have built machines that weighs less than 500 grams and competes pound for pound in a way with this machine. So we're able to detect literally thousands of compounds using a machine that weighs only 500 grams. And it's that machine that we put into bathrooms, that we're putting at airports today, and we're deploying at several locations and scaling up the manufacturing of these machines to detect smell on a planet scale. This is what the biochip looks like. It has about 4 channels. The current architecture is able to go up to about 16 channels, which means we can detect about 4,096 different compounds simultaneously. The next generation of devices will be exponentially bigger than this. We already have the design, we have the pathway to go into this. And we show the data that we can detect really explosive compounds at very, very low concentrations. Lastly, we have customers already. So we've generated more than $10 million in revenue, with more than $300 million in qualified contracts on the table. We're scaling manufacturing now and looking to put this technology everywhere where they can make human life better, because that's what we're put here to do. Thank you so much.
So, Nadine, I know those are tough acts to follow, but I have every confidence it's not going to be a problem as you take us from where we're going in the future to what you're doing that's affecting us today, as well as what will affect us in the future. Please.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Dr. Nadine Hashash Haram. I'm a reconstructive plastic surgeon working in the areas of breast and pelvic cancer reconstruction in London, England. But I'm also the founder and CEO of Proximie, a global health tech company that is truly digitizing the operating room and the cath lab. We are enabling surgeons and surgical teams to virtually scrub into operating rooms all around the world, to really connect, collect, and activate data from the OR, to hopefully improve the delivery of surgical care, to reduce variation, and to prove democratization of surgery for everyone around the world. As a surgeon for over 15 years now, I've seen firsthand the fundamental challenges that we're facing in surgery around variation in access, variation in care, and variation in quality. Statistics say that any one of us may need anywhere from 5 to 8 procedures in our lifetime, no matter how minor or major they may be. And so truly surgery affects all of us. But unfortunately, we're facing a most unprecedented crisis in surgery today, with challenges around the workforce, challenges around safety and quality, and challenges around productivity. And some of the numbers speak for themselves. Today, 7 million people around the world experience disabling surgical complications globally, of which 1 million patients die every year. In the United States, of the 250,000 medical errors that we see, 30% are tied to surgery. But most striking, and I think the one that really hit home for me, is that today in the world, 5 billion people lack access to safe surgery. That's 2/3 of the world's population, more than HIV, TB, and malaria combined. And so what's clear to me is that more of the same isn't going to cut it. And as a surgeon working in these operating rooms for those many years, I recognize that more of that same process that we do is not going to help us address this gap. And so truly the compelling need for digital care solutions became ever more necessary. And whilst we still deliver 330 million operations a year, to bridge this gap, we need to deliver another 143 million operations. That's going to require 25 million healthcare workers to deliver that. And even if we found those 25 million people that wanted to do it, it would take us another 5 to 10 years at least to train them. And so we recognize that this gap is too big to address through the human models of clinical and surgical care that we've been doing for decades. And I started to look at this more deeply, having spent many years in the OR all around the world through global health initiatives with medical device companies, and of course within our own programs in the UK as well. And what was clear to me is that this is truly a problem everywhere, not just somewhere. This concept of this is a problem of the global south or of certain parts of the world is just simply not true. Even here in the United States, the stark difference of access to surgical care between our rural and urban communities are staggering. And so when we need to think about a solution, it has to be a globally accessible solution that fundamentally disrupts how we deliver surgical care for the world. And so to look at this, I started to look back into the history of surgery. What was the genesis of surgery? Well, if you looked at the first picture, the genesis of surgery was the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and co-presence. And these are pictures from the archives that really show the birth of surgery being about people being in the same room together, observing, communicating, collaborating, driving change, and pushing the boundaries. And unfortunately, when you look to the picture in the middle, which is not from that long ago, we're still doing more of the same. We're just putting more people in operating rooms physically present and hoping that that's going to help us scale surgery. And that picture in the middle is from a very famous pediatric cardiologist, Dr. DeBakey in Texas, who was really a world leader in pediatric cardiology. And you can see many people huddled around his table trying to see what's going on during the operation. And I'm sure you'd agree that that's not conducive to scale, but more importantly, just the amount of variation that's going to come out of that. Each person will adapt and interpret what's happening during the operation and then go and implement it in their own healthcare system, perhaps with some variation in it. And that variation is transcending across all of surgery. Even in the United Kingdom today, between one hospital and another, you're 14 times more likely to suffer variation complications in colorectal surgery. And so the OR is analog, it's manual, it's still too archaic, it's unstructured, it's opaque, it's not transparent. And so we created a new category of the future operating room, the digital operating room, the one that's connected, collaborative, intelligent, transparent, and data-driven, where we can leverage all the information in a very data-rich environment and truly redefine the delivery of surgical care. Imagine a global network of borderless, digitally connected operating rooms brimming with the world's best surgeons. Intelligent operating rooms, unburdened by geography or time, where every single interaction is recorded, connected, reviewed, and stored to shape and improve best practice. A digital continuum of surgical expertise designed to reduce variation in care. Every touch, sound, piece of technology, every patient outcome. The paradigm of surgery and healthcare is changing. It is being reimagined by the operating system of the operating room. Proximie is a centralized platform designed to scale expertise beyond the 4 walls of an operating room. This once analog environment is now a digitally connected and data-driven operating system designed to improve global healthcare. And what we're able to do is really leverage existing technology and new cutting-edge technology to bring this to the fore. Think about AI and machine learning, edge compute, 5G and connectivity, cloud infrastructure, which, believe it or not, for some hospitals is still a new idea, and including space tech as well. We are now able to redefine an operating room from the 4 walls of a bricks and mortar infrastructure to a borderless digital operating room. And we're doing that by building the infrastructure. We believe that having built the piping ourselves at Proximie, we're able to create the mechanisms that help us crowdsource the data and redistribute it to where it's needed, where we're able to look at surgical care and compare it through temporal segmentation, through understanding operative workflow, instrumentation, human factors and ethnography in the room as well. By creating the tools that enable us to do that, we can then create the actionable insights that drive the delivery of surgical care at scale. And so our platform today is cloud-based, and we're deployed all around the world, enabling that through any device and any system around the world. We're a software company that is leveraging existing hardware in the OR and bringing together people, processes, and devices to translate that into the care that is needed. And to just show you some pictures, what we do is we really aggregate video and audio data and machine data from anything in the room. Through the pictures, for example, at the top, you'll see in an orthopedics case, we can pull in imaging from a C-arm, we can pull in hemodynamics devices from an anesthetic machine, room views of what's going on as people operate and work through that, as well as instrumentation at the table. And then we're able to layer on top of that visualization tools like augmented reality for immersive collaboration, as well as machine learning and AI that's helping us identify certain pathology, certain instrumentation, but even looking at productivity and workflow in the operating room as well. And when we think about the paradigm of surgery, it's not just about delivering surgical care at scale. It's about training the next generation of surgeons. The old adage of see one, do one, teach one, which is how we all trained, is arduous. It's long, it's not necessarily data-driven, and it's hard to decipher how we scale that for the future. And so we've redefined that into a digital continuum of prepare, perform, and perfect. Not too dissimilar, actually, to the sporting world. Atul Gawande said many years ago that surgery should be thought about also with the mindset of surgical coaching. The way we train athletes is astronomical. I mean, the amount of data we extract from them and the way we analyze performance metrics and give them tools that help them continuously improve should be no different in healthcare, where the stakes are much higher. And so in surgery, we are the game tape. We are helping you go back and analyze cases to better understand how to reduce risk, how to improve quality, how to improve access, and how to layer that data into actionable insights, which in the future can even bring in tools for automation and aggregation at scale. And at the application layer, what we provide to the end users are different tools that bring that digital continuum together. From telepresence, where you can literally virtually scrub into any operating room in the world, to media management and data curation, where you're able to pull the video data sets and tag and label and edit them as needed, to data insights as well. And today we are in over 800 operating rooms in over 800 facilities around the world, deploying this with tens and tens of thousands of surgical video data sets. We're the largest surgical video data set in the world, which in the future will enable future R&D and development for many labs and many device companies to come.
With Proximie, it's just been a game changer. I am able to, every time I operate, have another surgeon in the room.
And anything that we can do to improve accuracy, obviously, will improve the outcome of the patient. And that's really what we're focusing on by working to develop these platforms.
We had a mother who had developed massive bleeding after a normal vaginal delivery. So we had to rush the mother into theater. We did open the abdomen and found that the uterus had ruptured on one side. So while our consultants were following through the process online, the entire operation was successful. The mother was saved.
Yeah, I got rules about technology. It has to be just intuitive and in the background. It can't be something that it's distracting my attention from my primary focus. It needs to enhance the operative experience, not detract from it. And Proximie clearly does that.
And what's truly important and what's dear to my heart is really the genesis of Proximie. Proximie was born out of a first-hand need for me to deliver a way to build legacy and impact, to really democratize surgery and make it accessible to anyone, no matter where they are in the world. And today, Proximie is being used in the most sophisticated hospitals here in the United States, as well as the most rural hospitals, as you saw in McElwainey County, where we're delivering safe obstetric care to women who otherwise would have died in childbirth. And I'd like to end with a story, if that's all right. I think that sometimes when you bring it back to the human stories, it's where we see the intersection of technology and healthcare really making a big difference. With this patient, this was a 55-year-old patient who unfortunately had suffered multiple complications following a laparotomy that didn't go to plan. She'd been in intensive care, she had to be PEG-fed for a long time, and at many times almost lost her life. Eventually, she was left with a pretty bad abdominal wall hernia, which basically meant every time she got up or down, the whole abdomen would sort of press forward, the whole bowel would sort of press forward, and she'd have chances of obstruction, difficulty eating, and difficulty with just simple activities of daily living. She wanted to stay local to home, but the expertise needed for that care wasn't available locally. And so by reaching out to us, she asked if we could enable a virtual expert to work with her surgeon to help them deliver the care that she needed. And we obliged. The surgeons dialed in together, they worked through her case, she was home within a week, and that next summer she was living her best life with her grandkids at the beach like nothing had ever happened. And this patient is my mother. And so I truly believe that by bringing innovations and solutions, it's not just about solving the solutions for today, it's about the solutions for the future as well. And without certainty, healthcare and technology will continue to be intertwined for the future. And it is through companies like Proxima where we can really leverage machine learning, data, and AI to really enable us to drive neural networks and benchmarking in surgery, reducing variation, and hopefully making sure that every patient, no matter where they are in the world, have the best care the first time, every time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So in the time we have left, I thought it'd be a good idea to learn a little bit more about the background of each of our panelists today and how did they get to where they got. So Mike, you started out in business. You sound, as everybody heard today, like someone who's had a PhD in bioscience. Tell us sort of about your career path and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up outside of New York City thinking the path to salvation was investment banking. And, I got to my first job and was working basically 24/7 and was lacking a sense of purpose in life. And, I was fortunate at that time to be working and covering the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry. I went back to business school. And out of business school, I went to Merck, one of the large global pharmaceutical companies. And I was really fortunate to have two extraordinary mentors that basically said, Mike, if you come to Merck, we will show you the whole company. And a lady named Judy Lewent, who was kind of a Mozart of finance in the pharmaceutical industry, helped share the different parts of the company, from the late stage pipeline to the pre-commercialization processes, to going abroad. And then later in my career, Ken Frazier, who was Merck's longtime CEO, helped kind of share a little bit about why you do the things you do in pharmaceutical industry. And Ken is a purpose-driven leader of the highest order. And basically taught me that there are really two metrics that count in these industries. How many people do you help, and how much help do you provide those people? And I was fortunate to work with some amazing scientists along the way to help get me to a base level of acumen. And now the goal is really, can we now translate the latest at this intersection of science and technology to help those that need help around the world? And unfortunately, for the most part, drugs are the purview of the rich. And too many people in every part of the world don't have access to them. And when you have a technology that's as scalable and as impactful as the one that we're working on, you have an opportunity to rethink the business model entirely and think about how you provide global access to the medicines that people need in every part of the world.
Thank you. And Ash, you've had you started out in Lagos, Nigeria, and tell us a little bit about the journey and where it took you and how you wound up in Silicon Valley.
Thank you, Richard. As some of you might, if you have a keen ear for it, I'm originally from Nigeria. I was born in Lagos. I think it was back in 2000. After my bachelor's degree, I told my colleagues that I was in physics, that we're doing the bachelor's degree together, that I was going to get a job. I was going to get a job in Switzerland. And everyone looks at me and says, Osh, you always say things like this. What, you don't think they have physicists in Switzerland?
And my response to, well, have you ever tried to get a job in Switzerland before? And they're like, no, so how do you know they won't take me? So I applied for the job. The guys in Switzerland were excited. So I went to Switzerland, and I started working straight out of university on robotics. I was programming robots. We were programming robots with what is today known as AI. So we were working on AI in Zurich before it was cool. In fact, one of our earliest customers, the company was eventually acquired, one of our earliest customers was actually Google. And till date, we didn't know why Google will come to us for a robot. So after my work in Switzerland, that was my first really exposure to the idea. We had this robot, we could program it. It was a pick-and-place robot. Now there's a more fanciful name for it. They are called cobots. And you look at this robot, and given all the resources that it consumes, it couldn't really do much. It was PIC microcontrollers and so on and so forth. And every time I would look at my hand, and I would look at the magic that his hand would perform, I would ask myself, whatever sorcery biology was up to, I want to find out, right? So that's when I decided to go do further studies. So I went to Sweden, and I did my master's with a concentration on theoretical physics and computational neuroscience, and then I went to the ETH in Zurich. That's not Ethereum, that's the same university Albert Einstein went to. And that was where I did another PhD in computational neuroscience and bioengineering, and I went off to Imperial College in London. After my PhD, I founded this company and tried to raise money in Europe. If you know me, you know that I have a little bit of demon energy in me. I'm very energetic. And I tried to raise money in Europe, which was very hard. I pitched to the first VC in Silicon Valley, and their reaction was, I love this guy. So they got me on a plane, and I flew here. And I'm happy to say I'm a newly minted American, happy to be here, exciting work. And yeah, that's essentially my journey in a nutshell.
Well, and we're grateful. We're grateful. So Nadine, you started in San Diego, and then tell us how you went back to Lebanon and the influence your grandmother had on you and the doctor you met there, and just how you got to this place.
Well, as you said, I was born in San Diego, California, which is a great part of the world, not too far from here. But when I was 8 or 9, my parents decided it was time to move back to Lebanon, where our heritage, our family's originally from. And Lebanon was still emerging from a civil war. So very stark difference, very different environment, where things we'd probably taken for granted as children growing up here, it was really interesting to sort of see simple things like water, electricity, the basics. And growing up in that environment, it was very much about community, about giving back. And my grandmother's a very big philanthropist in our community. And she always taught me about the importance of impact, legacy, and trying to help others. And that should be your purpose in life. And I was about 13 or 14 when a reconstructive plastic surgeon would come over from New York to come and do trauma reconstruction for a lot of the blast victims living in Lebanon. And he invited me to come along with him. And so, of course, now you can't have any 14-year-olds in operating rooms, but back then you could. So he let me come along, and I was mesmerized. I mean, it was a young kid, a young girl he was operating on. They were reconstructing her leg. She had a Burns contracture. She couldn't walk, and they were able to perform this procedure. And I remember rushing home that day and telling my mother, I'm going to be a reconstructive surgeon. That's exactly what I want to do. And I never looked back, and I committed my time from day one, even from med school, to be involved in global health. So every year I would spend 6 to 8 weeks in different parts of the world, Vietnam, we've been to parts of South America and the Middle East, looking at how we can build capacity and sustainability in surgical care. And it was really in 2014 when the Lancet Commission we were hearing about the data coming out from the Lancet Commission. And I was sitting on one of those footstools in my operating room, getting ready for the next patient to come in. I just spent 15 hours coming back from Vietnam. We're getting ready for our next sort of mission. It was my last one because I was pregnant with my third. And I thought to myself, this is just so not scalable, and 5 billion people. I mean, these trips that I'm doing are never going to sort of shift the needle. How do we train doctors faster? How do we bring data and bring it to the fore? And I just looked around my operating room. It's the most analog environment if any of you have ever been into an operating room. We still write op notes and count swabs manually. And I just thought, how could we not digitize this environment, one of the most expensive assets of a hospital, and we don't digitize it and understand it? And that really prompted me on that mission to bring technology and healthcare into the OR, and I've never looked back.
So as you can see, not one of these individuals would have thought when they were younger that they were going to wind up where they wound up. But they took advantage of opportunities and they took advantage of their dreams. So in the last couple minutes here, to leave everybody here, I think we're all really engaged in what you're doing and excited about it. But tell us what you're excited about as you look forward to the next 5 years. You know, Ash, and Nadine, and Mike, what excites you the most as you're looking forward?
I tell anyone that cares to listen that for us as a company, we're on this journey to really scale the technology we've built here. That journey has been very hard, but I think what is most rewarding for me is this idea that we can genuinely deliver data to people. I see this from a perspective of a guy that grew up in a country where people had very little to work with. It's that idea that we can take what we have with the very little, give it to people, allow them to make informed decisions on their own life. I am very much for that agency, that we can give that agency to people. By far, that's what excites me most about what we're building at Koniku, to give that agency to people for them to live
It's fantastic.
how they wish.
That's great. Nadine?
And I think for me, 7 years ago when I stood up on a stage and talked about this future of the OR, there was a lot of laughs and, this is impossible or crazy. And so it's exciting even today to see the adoption and the disruption that we've been able to bring into the OR. But what excites me more, I think, about the future is, continuing to build into that intersection of the human-machine interface. How do we truly bring these newer technologies, we're hearing about generative AI, the ability to really accelerate skill acquisition, workforce management, and bringing care to patients. And most importantly, I think, which is what always drives me, is impact to patients, the human stories. I think we hear every day in our team about stories where Proxim's been able to change people's lives, and I hope that we can do many, many more of those in the future.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, so when I first heard about Generate a couple of years ago, I thought it was complete science fiction. At the time, these terms of generative AI weren't talked about. There was no ChatGPT. And we've seen how, by understanding the language, the human language, we can aid the creative process in very, very meaningful ways. Applying that to biology is going to help us understand the code of life. And if you can do that, we are going to change and solve a lot of the great unmet medical needs that face the world. And for me, I think Nadine's story about her mother, all of these things are personal. So we spend a lot of time working on cancer. We spend a lot of time working on immunology, infectious disease. These are diseases that have touched every single person in this audience in one way, shape, or form. And if we can come up with better answers to those diseases faster and make those available globally, we're going to do a lot of good for the world. And that's what excites me the most.
And I'll close by telling you what excites me the most is that I can be so optimistic about the future because individuals like the three of you have combined extraordinary intellect and talent with good hearts to try to make the world a better place. AI can be used for good, for bad, or whatever else, but you're using it to make life better. And one thing that we know is robots and AI and machines, they're never going to have a heart. And I think it's the heart that makes a difference. You've proven that to us today. I thank you for being here. I thank you for joining us this morning at the Milken Conference. And hopefully you can go away like I am going away with the optimism about our future. So thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please make your way to the next session.